talk about Jupiter in Libra. But before we talk about Jupiter in Libra, let's talk about Jupiter and Libra separately, so that we're sure that we understand what Jupiter signifies and we understand what Libra signifies before we try to put them together and talk about what they mean when they get together. Okay? So that's what we'll do. First, we'll talk about Jupiter and Libra. Then we'll talk about Jupiter in Libra. And then we will look at a list of people who have Jupiter in Libra. And then we'll take a close look at an archetypical Jupiter in Libra and an atypical Jupiter in Libra. Sound good? If you want to get this kind of information tailored to you and your chart and all your planets and your signs and houses and nakshatras, etc., go to my website. The link is on the screen over there and in the description below. It's victorcara.com. Go over to the report section and order the report called Guided Tour to Your Birth Chart. Let's start with Jupiter. What does Jupiter represent? At the root of everything that Jupiter signifies, it signifies positivity. One of the primary meanings of positivity is the positive sign, the plus sign. And that's very indicative of what Jupiter is all about. It's about things growing, increasing, being successful or ample. Hence, the planet is productive or creative, and this is why it's the planet for parenting, because the parents are the productive people who make the children, who make the human race grow, make the family grow, make the human race grow, etc. So that explains why Jupiter is the planet of parenting, and because it's the planet of parenting, this is why it's the planet of gurus, priests, teachers, etc. Those are all the parental figures in society. And this also explains why Jupiter is a very charitable or giving signifier, because Jupiter's base symbolism is positivity, which means you're going to have growth, which means you're going to have surplus, which means you can give. So Jupiter has this nature of being charitable, generous, and giving, having enough to share. The other thing about positivity is the sense of, wow, you're so positive. You're optimistic. So Jupiter is the planet that signifies optimism, and this is why Jupiter has to do with what you trust, what you're optimistic about, what you think will work, even though you don't actually know for sure. So it's a planet of faith, belief, etc., religion. And this is why it's all about morals, what we believe in, what we believe to be true. So it's a planet for morals, virtues, belief systems, ethics, like that. And it's a very honest planet, therefore. And finally, the bottom line of everything that Jupiter represents is this kind of package deal of all this morals and ethics and philosophy that you get from your parents and your priests and your gurus. It's called religion or called wisdom or called philosophy or whatever. Now you know everything you need to know about Jupiter, but you haven't learned anything yet about Libra. So let's do this same kind of thing for Libra. The root of everything Libra signifies is sensitivity. It's an air sign that belongs to Venus. Venus is sensual and air is sensual. But it's male, it's a masculine sign. So it's a sensitive sign. It likes to sense. It likes to experience. So one sense of the word sensitivity means you have acuity in how you experience things. And this also means or implies that you have skill. Libra is a skilled zodiac sign because it's acute, it's attentive to details. So hence it's skillful in dealing with details. And this in turn is why Libra is a sign which is very involved with arts and intellect. In other words, things which require a lot of attention and detail in order to understand or deal with. That's Libra's domain. So in that sense of sensitivity, Libra is attentive or perceptive and therefore good with arts and therefore good with intellectual things. The other sense of the word sensitivity is you feel things deeply. So Libra has empathy towards others, and it's because it's empathetic or sensitive, it feels what other people feel. Hence, Libra is known for being an equality-oriented sign, a fairness-oriented sign. Like the scales are actually a symbol for justice, right? So because Libra is attentive and empathetic to others, and therefore interested in fairness and equality, then it gets into partnerships rather than trying to do things solo, and it prefers partnerships. So it's a cooperation-oriented planet, and it likes to make treaties or agreements, so it's a peaceful sign. Sorry, did I say planet before? I meant sign. So it's peaceful and cooperative. The other interesting thing about Libra is that it's mercantile, or it's good with business and exchange, and the reason for this is because it's good with treaties, negotiations, cooperation, or partnerships. So, because it's sensitive, therefore it's empathetic. Because it's empathetic, it forms partnerships with others. And because it forms partnerships with others, it exchanges well with others. And therefore, it's good with trade and commerce. And because it likes equality and fairness, therefore it's very justice-oriented. And it likes to protect people's liberties and freedoms. So Libra is a very American kind of symbol in a way, and this is why the Statue of Liberty is really a symbol for Libra, a woman holding the scales. That's just Libra right there. Those kind of ideals that people should be treated equally, people should be treated fairly, everyone should have access to justice, etc. So that is now everything that we need to know about Libra. So now we know what we need to know about Jupiter. We know what we need to know about Libra. Now we can intelligently discuss what it means when Jupiter is in Libra. So in order to figure out Jupiter in Libra, we use the same basic approach or technique that we use for figuring out anything anywhere. What you do is you take thing 1 and you compare it to thing 2. So you take Jupiter and you compare it to Libra and you say, is there something about both of them that is the same? You look for those things, areas where Jupiter and Libra are the same. And then you ask, are they the same about this but have opposite opinions, or are they the same about this but have complementary opinions? In Jupiter and Libra's case, they're always going to have complementary opinions. So let me give you the first example. The most important thing, or the basic thing about Jupiter and Libra, is that Jupiter is a planet for wisdom. And Libra has a lot to do with wisdom because it's a sign which is favorable to intellect. When you put Jupiter in Libra, this is the thing that vibrates. This is the thing that synergizes between the two. This stuff about intellect and wisdom. Hence, the interpretation for Jupiter in Libra is, here's a smart person. This intelligence is one which is suitable for arts. It's also very suited for social science because Libra is very involved with liberty, justice, fairness, equality. So the intelligence that Jupiter is going to produce in Libra is going to go particularly well with Libra type of things. So arts, social sciences, politics, how to run a society fairly. That's the baseline thing about Jupiter and Libra. The basic thing you have to take away is these people are smart. And they're pretty artistically smart and socially smart. The other thing that works with Jupiter and Libra is that Jupiter is a generous planet, right? Jupiter is generous and Libra is cooperative. So generous means you care about other people. You make room for other people. Cooperative means you're making room for other people. And this is why we interpret Jupiter and Libra as meaning the person cares about other people. So they're not a selfish person. They tend to be a charitable person. They do well, or they're wise about cooperation. So they're team-oriented and a good teammate. They just have a personality which they tend to like or care about other people, so you can describe them as loving, and therefore they're likable, because we always like somebody that likes us. So that's another important thing about Jupiter and Libra. They're unselfish, team-oriented, and likable. There is another thing which I mentioned before. It's very similar to this. Jupiter is the planet of ethics, and Libra is a sign for equality, which is a type of an ethic, right? So Jupiter in Libra produces a person that's pretty preoccupied with ethics. They're pretty interested in ethics. Ethics are an important thing to them. And they will usually like to be Librarian in their ethics, which means they'll favor fairness, they'll favor justice. They'll be a very, very important thing about Jupiter and Libra is that this is the democratic archetype. Libra is the democratic archetype. Again, that's why it's the Statue of Liberty. So a Jupiter Libra person has a democratic attitude, which means not monarchy. They're not into monarchy. They'll be distrustful of monarchy. And you'll say, well, what is that archaic concept, monarchy? It just means authoritarian figures, hierarchical structures. Jupiter and Libra, they work well on teams, but they don't work well in hierarchical structures because they distrust people who are bosses, but because often those people who are bosses don't have the qualification for it. So they don't submit. Jupiter Libra people don't submit well to customs just because they're customs. They don't submit well to authorities just because they're authorities. They will buck the system in trying to establish something better for the common people. And finally, one other pleasant side effect of Jupiter in Libra is that it's good for wealth. Why is that? Because Jupiter is the planet for growth or increase or a plus sign, which means like income or profit. And Libra is the sign for exchange or commerce. So you have profit and commerce, profit from Jupiter, commerce from Libra. And that just indicates, well, this person is good with money. They don't tend to want for money. They're not a greedy type, remember, because their basic nature is unselfish and charitable. So it's not like they're a money-hungry type, although you'll see some that are. It can go that way. But Jupiter and Libra by itself doesn't produce a greedy person, but it does produce a person that's not likely to have money problems. Now let's look at some people who have Jupiter and Libra. The first group of people we have are politicians, and that is pretty understandable because that's the first thing about Jupiter and Libra is that it gives great intelligence for social sciences and politics. So you have some pretty significant politicians, historically significant. You have recent ones like Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, but you have very significant figures who have been remembered for a long time, like Winston Churchill, Akbar the Great. The nature of Akbar the Great, right? He was a Mughal emperor, who was a conqueror, etc. But his nature was very Jupiter and Libra. He's the one who tried to respect India. He's the one who tried to treat the Indians more fairly. Joan of Arc, very anti-establishment. Well, George Washington, the leader of a revolution. Genghis Khan, Ivan the Terrible, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's right-hand man, like the man who helped shape what the Nazi Party became almost as much as Hitler did, and Lucky Luciano, the mob boss. The next group of people on the list, billionaires. We have some very significant billionaires, and this is because the fourth thing about Jupiter and Libra, which is that Jupiter is profitable, surplusy, and Libra is mercantile or commercial. So it produces wealthy people. So, for example, you have Donald Trump, who's also a crossover politician. You have John D. Rockefeller, and you have Henry Ford. Next group of people are artists. Again, like the politicians, these are very significant artists. They're not just recent ones. And again, this comes back to the first thing about Jupiter and Libra, which is wisdom and intellect, suited to librarian things such as arts. So you have Mozart, Bach, very, 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 very significant musicians. Michael Jackson, Freddie Mercury, Prince, Christina Aguilera, very talented, Mariah Carey, very talented, Alicia Keys, very talented. And then also you have painters like Diego Rivera and Raphael. Another group of people on here are models or designers. And again, this is for the same reason. Jupiter in Libra is artsy because it has wisdom combining with intellect suited to librarian things like the arts. So you have Brigitte Bardot. Now, not only is she beautiful, she's very politically oriented and she's very Libra progressive type of politics. Sophia Loren, Giorgio Armani. And finally, the last group of people on the list are philosophers. So, for example, Vivekananda, Sadhguru, Mother Teresa. And these types of people, they're not exactly philosophers. They're like social activist philosophers, right? Because that's the nature of Libra. So Mother Teresa, Sadhguru, Vivekananda, Carl Jung, Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King Jr., but Martin Luther, the founder of Lutheranism, who went against, the Catholic Church. So that's with this ethics and equality thing, distrustful of monarchy. You'll see this. Sadhguru also, right? Vivekananda. He did not stick with the tradition of not traveling outside of India, which was anathema to high caste Hindus. Martin Luther, Carl Jung is a groundbreaker. And me. I happen to have Jupiter in Libra. Okay, let's wrap it up by looking at two of these people in more detail. We'll pick a archetypical type and a antithetical type. And again, before we go, just to remind you, if this stuff looks awesome to you, it is awesome. And if you want to get all this kind of information specifically for your chart, go to my site, victorcara.com, and order that report, guided tour of your birth chart. You'll get all that. Now, let's take a closer look at the charts of two of these people. The archetypical type is Sadhguru. And the atypical Jupiter in Libra is Joseph Goebbels. Why do I pick these two guys as archetypical and atypical? In a sense, they're both very typical, Jupiter and Libra. Both of them are very political or socially oriented. Both of them are very artistic. Both of them are philosophical or religious. Joseph Goebbels almost wound up a Catholic priest. Both of them are iconoclasts. Both of them are wealthy. So both of them have archetypical Jupiter and Libra traits. But the key thing that differentiates them is Sadhguru is a very loving and likable type. Whereas Joseph Goebbels is a very hateful and hated type. He's the Nazi. So let's try to figure out why Goebbels is not typical Jupiter and Libra in being generous, kind, loving, and likable. But Sadhguru is. So if you look at Sadhguru's chart, you'll notice that Jupiter is pretty prominent, because it's the first lord. So this Jupiter in Libra is going to be very definitive of what this person is actually looking like right on the outside, right on the eye, because it's the first lord. So his first lord is Jupiter in Libra with Venus in the 11th house. So he's likable, affluent, pleasant, good looking, nice skin, nice eyes, etc. The other one, Mr. Joseph Goebbels, however the heck you say that, he has Ketu right on his ascendant. His Ketu is massively dominating this chart. And one of the big reasons for it is that it's really right on the ascendant. So this person, the main context of what you would describe Joseph Goebbels, you better be looking at Ketu. And Jupiter in Libra is something else about him that also fits into the puzzle. But the main backbone of Joseph Goebbels is Ketu on the ascendant. With Sadhguru, Jupiter in Libra is his first lord, so it's very important. With Joseph Goebbels, Jupiter is not his first lord. The sun is his first lord. So where's the sun? His sun is in Scorpio with Mars. And Ketu is dominating, vastly dominating. Now you can see why these two people are quite different. And actually, if you look at his Jupiter in Libra, it looks like it has no legs. Like, in other words, it doesn't really move, or it doesn't really get to express itself fully. You know why? Because it's in something called Bhavasandhi. It's on the border between two signs. So it loses efficacy because it's dealing with transitioning from one sign to the other. So there you go. I hope you liked this video and subscribe to the channel and stick around and see you again soon for the next one, Jupiter and Scorpio.